Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The gentleman, for what purposes, the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Let me first just say that I expect that when the court does hear this challenge, if it comes to that, I expect that she will rule in favor of the constitutional separation and checks and balances in our oversight function. I really don't understand the arguments that have been articulated by my colleagues. And as I understand it, there have been three different reasons that have been suggested for opposing our effort to simply uphold our Article I responsibility as a separate and co-equal branch of government. One, that this whole thing is a politically inspired witch hunt. Nonsense. Two, they want to all of a sudden protect the reputational interests of innocent Americans. Nonsense. Three, this blanket assertion of executive privilege. Nonsense. Let's take all three. First of all, 17 different intelligence agencies have concluded that Russia interfered with our election, attacked our democracy for the sole purpose of artificially placing someone at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, were successful. And that's also what the Mueller report shows. This is not a politically inspired witch hunt. I'm confused. Every single person at the helm of this investigation is a Republican. The person who initiated the investigation, former FBI Director James Comey, Republican. The FBI Director who replaced him and presided over the investigation, Christopher Wray, Republican. The person who decided to appoint a special counsel to preside over the investigation and then monitored it at the helm of the Department of Justice, the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, Republican. The person who actually conducted the investigation, a war hero, a law enforcement professional, Bob Mueller, lifetime Republican. Who is the Attorney General going to investigate? The Republican Party? The notion that it's a politically inspired witch hunt is just one of 10,000 or more misrepresentations that have been spun out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. It's a shame that you choose to adopt it and parrot it. Second thing, reputational interests? Really? Many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle actually perpetrated a witch hunt as it relates to securing more than 800,000 documents from this very same Department of Justice without regard to the reputational interests of Americans who have served this country. You weren't concerned with the reputational interests of Hillary Clinton. In fact, the top Republican said that the sole objective was to undermine her, the former First Lady and Secretary of State. You weren't concerned with the reputational interests of Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. In fact, you embarrassed those two. They made mistakes, but you embarrassed those two. You weren't concerned with the reputational interests of Andy McCabe. So don't peddle that phony argument to us. This very same Department of Justice turned over 800,000 pages of documents, but they won't turn over a single page pursuant to a legitimately issued subpoena? And then you want to assert executive privilege. Are you kidding me? You can't assert executive privilege after the fact when the closest advisors to the president have already spoken to Team Mueller? Wait a second, let's try to go through this. White House counsel Don McCann talked to Mueller. There's no assertion of executive privilege. White House press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders talked to Mueller. No assertion of executive privilege. White House communications director Hope Hicks talked to Mueller. There was no assertion of executive privilege. It's a phony argument. The House is a separate and co-equal branch of government. We're not a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump administration. We don't work for Donald Trump. We work for the American people. We have a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check and balance on an out-of-control executive branch. The Attorney General is totally out of control. He will be held in contempt of Congress.
It is Thursday, the 9th of May of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Medtro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well. Hey, I didn't realize it, but Meghan McCain's husband, Ben Domenech, he blocked me apparently some time ago. I wonder if it was something I said. I wonder. I don't remember, but it must have been something I said, and it must have been on Twitter because Ben blocked me. God, every single one of these MAGA hatter right-wing fire breathers are really snowflakes. They really are. They melt at the least bit of confrontation. Well, let's put it this way. They trigger. When I say melt, I mean they may break down into a fire-hot rage. Old Ben. And Mick the Prick Mulvaney says, it's bad form. Really bad form for the Senate panel to subpoena Donnie Jr. Really bad form. Well, Mick the Prick, you could be up next, so I would be maybe holding your fire a little bit too. Wow, what a night and what a day it's going to be. Are we in a constitutional crisis? I would say we began a constitutional crisis the day Donald Trump took office officially. Remember that day, that inauguration day? Oh, the giant crowds that he says were there. And we have to believe it or else. Speaking of believing it or else, don't go to Georgia. And if you're in Georgia, get out now. My God. GOP just passed one of the most draconian, absolutely bizarre laws in the history. Well, maybe I'm going overboard because the United States has had some pretty bizarre laws. Like slavery is a good one. And genocide of the Native Americans was another. Handmaid's Tale come to life. Real life mirrors art, or did art mirror real life? Yes, if you get pregnant in Georgia, you are in grave danger. Yes. The mortality rate of women will increase, as well as the babies that they'll be having or not. An 11-year-old girl was raped. They're going after her for murder. Why? Because she left this. I believe she left the state to get an abortion. You can't do that now. After 6 weeks, meaning when a woman has missed her period by 2 weeks, after 6 weeks, a woman can be tried for murder if she has a miscarriage. They apparently have enough money in Georgia to hire some investigators to go after women who have miscarriages to determine whether they were murderesses or not. And if you leave the state, you can be tried, I believe, for murder as well for having an abortion out of state. I don't really think this law will stand even in this Supreme Court, though you don't know because there are some Opus Dei assholes. Speaking of Opus Dei, did you know that William Barr is Opus Dei? Not like I'm shocked. Look at the guy. Pompous, know-it-all. I don't know. See, a lot of people say that I'm a know-it-all, and I say, no, I'm not a know-it-all. I just know a lot. I don't know it all. Who does? Come on. People who know a lot know that they can't know it all. But I know a lot. And I'm not going to apologize for trying to acquire knowledge instead of falling prey to superstition, which brings us to a legislator in Texas who accused scientists and doctors promoting vaccines as being sorcerers. Yeah, talk about fire breathers. Boy, what a day, what a night, what a life. What's on the rest of the menu today here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, that was Representative Hakeem Jeffries at the top, and he is mad as hell, and he's not going to take Trump's reclaiming executive privilege just because he wants to cover up the Mueller conclusions right now. Remember when they said Trump was a transactional president? Everything he does is transactional. That's just a nice way of saying the guy has no clue what's going on and he makes it up. Constitution? What's that? I don't care. I got a bunch of money. And apparently he doesn't have a bunch of money, but he believes he's of a class of people who have a bunch of money, and so therefore they have a direct line of communication to God on high, and they know the secrets of the universe by dint of the fact that they have a bunch of money, or believe that they are of a class of people who have that bunch of money. Now, I know people who have a bunch of money. They don't call them blue bloods for nothing. And they make a very fine distinction between old and new money, and Donald Trump has always been new money. And that's a pejorative, okay? Not that old money is, colored with the purity of purity. No, but still, at least there were, certain assumptions made about one's approach to life. I used to get very angry at the concept of noblesse oblige. You know, it's I think the term now that we would use is very patriarchal. But I almost wish for those days again. Quaint days when folks with a lot of money, either out of guilt or what, felt, well, I got a bunch of money, maybe I should give some back. Because that's what it meant to be an American. And Donald Trump has never been an American. He has never been a lover of truth, liberty, and the American way of life. Because American way of life is not New York real estate. And I don't understand this concept that real estate developers all want to lose money so they can cheat on their taxes. I was in the midst of real estate development, and no. I will say there was a time, and I worked for people and saw what they were doing and wondered. You know, they kept one set of books for the IRS, and they kept one set of books for the banks. For the IRS, they were losing money right and left. For the banks, they were making money hand over fist. And oftentimes, neither one of those were true. And then, thankfully, some regulations were slapped down on that behavior and stopped it. You had to keep one set of books for both. They started cross-referencing. Oh my God, look what these people are doing. Donnie wanted 2 books. And he's now glorying in that fact. I had 2 books, one for the banks, one for the IRS. It was like sport. No, it was like crime. Real estate developers didn't do that. And I will say that it was somewhat of a drag, I guess we might have said, back in the day, when others would cut corners, other companies, other groups, other individuals developing properties in the neighborhood. Because we were code plus. I mean, we didn't just do things to code. We went to code and better. It was a good selling point, too, I have to say. But then there were others in the neighborhood that would cut corners, and maybe they made a little bit extra money at the start, but the lawsuits when the structure fell apart, like a balcony falling off a wall 3-4 stories up and a bunch of students dying, maybe that'll come back to haunt you. If not morally, at least it will hit you in your pocketbook, and for a long time, too. And apparently there's a third of the country that thinks that behavior is just perfectly fine. Well, we've pretty much been able to keep that toxic element at bay. But as their numbers decrease, the toxicity increases, as it always does. It becomes more potent. The less of the mass becomes denser by the least amount of numbers that it has. Isn't that? It's just chemical reactions, folks. That's why we like reason. Some people might say it's being a good neighbor, and that's what makes America great. From the get-go, all right? All right, well, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, the Oregon GOP attacked Democrats for trying to stop the spread of a deadly measles outbreak. And it's all just to troll Democrats. They're using the health of the greater community and using the anti-vax moms and dads, and I got to tell you, they're white, as a pawn to troll the Democrats. Talk about craven. Speaking of craven, the Missouri GOP is trying to overturn an election reform referendum that was passed by 62% of the state's voters. And a North Carolina news station skewered Senators Tillis and Burr for sacrificing, quote, every last shred of integrity while bowing to partisan expediency above reason and truth, end quote. After the break, we then move to the chef's table where Trump lapdog Matt Gaetz wants Trump's enemies locked up for the crime of investigating Trump's crimes, because that's what a brown shirt lapdog does. And U.S. prosecutors indicted the Israeli operators of a dark web drug and gun referral service. And thankfully they did. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the chat room link at the rightish of the page, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. If you would then look at the leftish of the page at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com and across from the chat room link, you will notice the contribute link And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, that would not only be grand, and it would not only keep Resistance Radio resisting like it's been resisting for the last 8 years of continuous broadcasting 24/7, 365, you will also help us pay our bills and save some money to buy new machinery, because this machinery is getting to the end of its expected life. And they're workhorses, and we've been able to eke every little bit of energy and data out of them, and we can tell that we will be migrating that data to other machines, and probably sooner than later. But thank you for becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. It has been very helpful, and your generosity does go noticed, and we need more of you. So thank you for that consideration. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, because who else would? And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's at about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get the links on social media in that little interim of time, maybe a little over. And you can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeart, YouTube, and wherever podcasts can be found. Oh, and one other programming note. I suppose if you're listening to this on the live broadcast, you have already figured out how to do this, or you're set up for a different kind of machinery and whatnot, and this is the way that the internet works, and I'm just catching up here. So, and if you're listening to this on podcast, then this will be information if you to use if you are unable to get the live broadcast for whatever reason, like going to our homepage and the player doesn't work. If you would go to the top there where the HTTP, that bar at the top there, that URL bar, add an S, HTTPS. That makes it a secure line, and iPads and all sorts of Apple products and others that won't go to unsecured sites necessarily, then everything will work. The player will work on your device. So add that S to HTTP, and then it becomes HTTPS, as in secured. All right, so good. And I don't know why it's not. I think maybe we're still waiting to get the S added at the hosting service. Maybe that's what it is. But until that happens, that's the fix. All right. Let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, by the way. Oh, I've been getting some grief because grits are supposed to be, I don't know, not good. Or it's, I don't know, maybe they think it's some West Coast hippie guy trying to patronize grits. And maybe that's more to the truth. But I wouldn't have ever known about grits if people from grit country hadn't come to the West Coast, now would I? And they happen to be family, so get off my case. Grits are good. Food is good. All right, please. All right, this is out of Share Blue Media, and it is by Emily Singer. The Oregon Republican Party wants to help spread an infectious disease in order to troll Democrats. Well, at least that's what a tweet the Oregon GOP tweeted from its official account on Monday night, as it might suggest. The tweet said, Oregon Democrats were just joking about my body, my choice, while ramming forced injections down every Oregon parent's throat. That was what the Oregon GOP tweeted. Now that appears to be an attempt to attack Democrats for supporting abortion rights while at the same time passing legislation that would eliminate loopholes for parents to exploit in order to not vaccinate their children. The Oregon legislature is currently working to eliminate vaccination exemption loopholes amid a measles outbreak that has hit the state. Not just the state, the West Coast. It's unclear how the two issues are even remotely similar. Well, Emily is just being polite because I know how this right-wing MAGA mind works. Take disparate comparisons, bring them together, and troll the Democrats with it. It's gish gallop. Or some people might say gish gallop. Abortion is a personal decision. Not vaccinating your children creates a public health crisis that could spread infectious yet preventable diseases to babies who are too young to be vaccinated, as well as immunocompromised people who cannot receive a vaccine. On Monday, the Oregon State Legislature passed the bill with a virtual party line vote. Just 2 Republicans voted for the legislation, including GOP Representative Sherry Helt, who introduced the bill. One Republican introduced it. All the Democrats voted for it. One other Republican voted for it, and all the rest said, no, we're going to troll the Democrats and use the sorcery-minded anti-vaccine crowd as a pawn in our game. The Oregon Republican Party was asked whether the party's official position was to come out against vaccines, which science and doctors have all said are totally safe and should be administered to all who do not have medical exemptions. But the Oregon GOP did not respond to requests for comments. And why would they? They would rather launch baseless partisan attacks than protect the kids and the greater population of Oregon and maybe even the whole West Coast. Lisa Needham, also of Share Blue Media, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Missouri Republicans want to make sure they stay in power, so much so that they're happy to override the will of the voters to do it. And that's when does that ever stop them anyway? Please, the will of the voters had Hillary Clinton winning. Did the GOP allow that to keep going? No. Well, the GOP-controlled state Senate is set to approve a ballot initiative which was already approved by the state House that would undo a redistricting reform amendment passed by Missouri voters in 2018. The reform, the Clean Missouri referendum, was backed by an overwhelming 62% of Missouri voters, but since the measure would stop the GOP from gerrymandering the state, they're now trying to roll it back because business as usual is business as usual, and you can't take the usual business the way they've been doing business. They don't know how to do business then. It's too unusual for them. If Republicans had their way, their new measure would appear on the 2020 ballot. Clean Missouri made several changes to the state election laws, including capping campaign finance contributions, horrors, diminishing the power of lobbyists, multiple horrors, and making redistricting fair. Well, that's not fair to the Republicans who've been cheating this whole time to make gerrymandering really part of their model. The measure replaced Missouri's existing commission-based model of redistricting with a nonpartisan demographer. The state auditor would then take applications from that demographer and then forward at least 3 applications to the state Senate, and the Senate would get to pick the winner. I don't think so. Nice try. there in Missouri, but I see where you made a fatal flaw. You're expecting your chambers to have some sort of, I don't know, adherence to democracy, representative democratic republics. No. Although this process would give the state Senate the ultimate control over who became the state's demographer, and therefore who would draw legislative districts, the current state auditor is a Democrat. Giving a Democrat influence at any point in the process is apparently too much for the GOP to bear, so they want to go back to using the commission instead. Mostly because Republicans always project their own behavior on everybody else. That's why the world is going to hell in a handbasket, because they cut corners, they cheat, they are cutthroats, and they will do anything to win, and they think everybody is just like them because, well, they're normal, aren't they? Desai Martin, also of Share Blue Media, brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Medtro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. A North Carolina news station skewered Tom Tillis, a vulnerable senator, not venerable, vulnerable though, up for re-election in 2020 in an editorial yesterday, Wednesday, for his weak and impotent refusal to stand up to Trump. After noting that Trump recently surpassed the grim milestone of telling more than 10,000 lies, the editorial turned his attention to Tillis and the state's other Republican senator, Richard Burr. What a turncoat he's turned out to be, huh? Policies and billion-dollar decisions are being made based on these false claims and the blind loyalty of too many in Congress, the Capitol Broadcasting Company wrote in an editorial posted on the WRAL's website. That's particularly true for North Carolina Senators Richard Burr and Tom Tillis, who bow to partisan expediency above reason and truth. The news organization was particularly disappointed in Tillis for his epic flip-flop on Trump's false declaration of a national emergency over the U.S.-Mexico border. You know, where billions of microscopic black and brown people are invading our border, and wouldn't it be fun to shoot them? He said that last night. He wants to shoot people. Black and brown people right now, but black and brown people, he wants to shoot them because it would be fun. 30% of the population really loves this guy too. I would, I don't want to cause too much paranoia, but I kind of keep track of who my neighbors are. It might be wise for you to do the same. Befriend them. Hopefully it'll delay whatever it is that causes their lizard brains to trigger. Right after Trump declared the fake emergency, Tillis boldly declared he would stand on principle and vote to oppose the emergency declaration. But a few weeks later, Tillis caved to pressure from far-right fringes of the Republican Party, reversed his position, and placed the whims of Trump ahead of his oath to the U.S. Constitution. Trump has shit on people. Let's be clear about that. All right? That's his M.O., his modus operandi. He finds something he can use against you. What could be used against Tillis? Well, I would say right off the top, what infects the whole of the GOP? Laundered NRA Russian rubles. Every single GOP member has them, and every single GOP member wants to hide them. And I think with Tillis and Burr, it might be something a little bit more. At the time of the vote, rumors swirled that prominent conservatives were contemplating challenging Tillis in a primary battle. The rumors panned out as retired businessman Garland Tucker III launched a primary campaign in early May. Well, one could rhetorically ask whether Tillis is so intimidated by the primary challenge that he'll sacrifice every last shred of integrity. CPC called on both Tillis and Burr to put the country and the Constitution above their loyalty to Trump. Burr and Tillis must stand up to Trump's lies, stand with the Senate and the legislative branch of the government, the editorial stated. Sacrificing their integrity for momentary expedience is too high a price to pay for the long-term damage of Trump's dishonesty. Yet, sacrificing whatever integrity he has is exactly what Tillis continues to do over and over and over again. Okay, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. A physics lesson may be the last thing on your mind as you relax at the ocean. However,
if you're sitting on a lovely Hawaiian beach with your Mai Tai and you're looking offshore and you see 20-foot waves and people surfing on them and you notice that it's only lapping up on the shoreline here with teeny little waves, that's the reef working to dissipate that energy.
Mike Beck studies the intersection of engineering, ecology, economics, and finance at UC Santa Cruz, and he says reefs act a whole lot like our human-built coastal infrastructure to tame the energy of incoming waves.
They essentially act just like a low-crested submerged breakwater. That's an engineering term, but it means that there are really good engineering models for describing the benefits of reefs.
And those models are the key behind a new report from the U.S. Geological Survey, with Beck as one of its authors. The researchers modeled hypothetical storms hitting coastlines in areas with offshore reefs, like Florida, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. They studied how reefs of various heights would dampen waves and hold back flooding. And they found that every year, the country's reefs saved the U.S. an estimated $1.8 billion in direct flooding damages and other economic losses. That dollar number is important because it allows reef rebuilding projects, like gluing little healthy coral nubbins on damaged reefs, to tap into billions of dollars of federal money set aside for hurricane and disaster resilience.
If you can rigorously value the benefits of any of these habitats, you can unlock any of the funding mechanisms that would have typically been applied to developing a seawall or a breakwater.
That's a win-win for life below the water and for those of us who live on land as well. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Sweetie, want some fruit? You have to use the right tool for the job. A power drill is the wrong tool to slice fruit. Just like an antibiotic is the wrong tool to treat viruses, including colds and flu. Antibiotics are only needed for certain bacterial infections. When they aren't needed, antibiotics won't help you, and the side effects could still hurt you. Ask your healthcare professional when an antibiotic is the right tool and when it's not. Visit cdc.gov/antibiotic-use.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. On that day, workers and the U.S. labor movement lost a leading voice in a tragic plane crash. There is no greater calling than to serve your fellow men. There is no greater contribution than to help the weak. There is no greater satisfaction than to do it well. These inspiring words were the credo of Walter P. Reuther, the longtime leader of the United Automobile Workers. Reuther became president of the UAW in 1946 and held that position for a quarter of a century. Under his leadership, auto workers saw some of the greatest gains. The UAW was able to win improvements in job security, health care, and wages. Reuther's effective leadership caused the governor of Michigan to dub him the most dangerous man in Detroit. Reuther learned about the labor movement from his father, a member of the Brewers Union in Wheeling, West Virginia. As a young man, Reuther moved to Detroit to work in the booming auto industry, landing a job at Ford. He became involved in union organizing, gaining national prominence as he led a strike against General Motors in 1945. The next year, he was elected president of the UAW. Reuther believed that unions were part of a broader social movement and had the power to improve the lives of all working Americans. He was a strong supporter of the civil rights movement, delivering a speech at the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. As UAW president, he placed an emphasis on worker education. In 1960, the UAW built an education center in northern Michigan. Walter and his wife May were flying there when their plane crashed, killing them both. President Nixon called Reuther's death a deep loss not only for organized labor, but also for the cause of collective bargaining and the entire American process. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
There was high drama on Capitol Hill Wednesday. At the same time, the House Judiciary Committee was voting to hold Attorney General William Barr in contempt of Congress for his refusal to comply with their subpoena to turn over the full, unredacted Mueller report with all of the underlying evidence. The White House pushed back by invoking executive privilege to block the release of the Mueller report. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler responded, calling the administration's move a blanket defiance of Congress's oversight responsibilities and issuing a very dire warning.
We've talked for a long time about approaching a constitutional crisis. We are now in it. We are now in a constitutional crisis. Benjamin Franklin in 1787 was asked when he exited the Constitutional Convention, "What type of government have you given us, sir?" And he said, by a woman who asked him the question, he said, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." Now is the time of testing whether we can keep a republic or whether this republic is destined to change into a different, more tyrannical form of government as other republics have over the centuries. We must resist this. This is far broader than Republican or Democratic or even the rights of Congress. This is whether we can put limits on the power of the president, any president, and the executive branch, and hold the president, any president, accountable. That's what is at stake here. We cannot flinch, and we will not flinch.
Sheila Jackson Lee had a few words to say about the White House invoking executive privilege over the entire Mueller report.
I'm pausing for a moment because I do think this is a moment in history. But having received a copy of the letter to the President of the United States by General Barr and a letter from the Department of Justice indicating after their purposeful collapse of the negotiations, I can only conclude that the President now seeks to take a wrecking ball through the Constitution of the United States of America. For the first time in the history of the United States, a president is now exerting executive privilege over every aspect of life that the American people desire to have information. Whether or not their Affordable Care Act is dissolving the pre-existing condition, whether or not children are being separated from their parents, whether or not the environment is being destroyed. Anything that the Congress wants to do on behalf of the American people is now being alleged to be under the jurisdiction of privilege.
The contempt measure now goes to the full House for a vote, while the battle over the Mueller report is most likely headed to the courts. The president has vowed to oppose all Democratic subpoenas, while the Democrats say the White House's stonewalling of congressional investigations might lead to impeachment proceedings. Despite Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's assertion that, regarding the Mueller probe, it's case closed, the Republican-controlled Senate Intelligence Committee subpoenaed Donald Trump Jr.
Donald Trump Jr. is in a standoff with the committee about returning before this panel. There's some concerns within Trump Jr.'s camp that this may be an effort potentially to walk into what they believe is a perjury trap. Well, we're told from one source familiar with the matter that Donald Trump Jr. may even take the fifth if he were to come to Capitol Hill and be forced to testify, or potentially not come at all, which of course would raise a whole slew of questions and potentially holding him in contempt.
The administration's latest assault on the Constitution takes direct aim at the First Amendment. The Washington Post's Dana Milbank tweeted on Wednesday that his press pass of 21 years had just been revoked as part of its broader crackdown on journalist access. Other journalists began tweeting that their credentials too had been revoked. It appears that the Trump administration has begun enforcing new rules that severely limit the number of journalists given press passes that afford them easier access to the White House. So whatever happened to "we fell in love"? North Korea on Thursday fired at least one unidentified projectile from the country's western area, according to the South Korea military. It was the North's second weapons launch in the last 5 days and a possible warning that nuclear disarmament talks with Washington could be in danger. You think? The Washington Post is reporting that Donald Trump is growing increasingly angry at John Bolton over the failure to oust Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, complaining that his own officials misled him about how easy it would be to overthrow him. Trump is said to be blaming his national security advisor, accusing him of trying to pull Trump into a war with Venezuela and its allies. Officials have told the newspaper the chances of Maduro making a swift exit have decreased and that Trump is annoyed about having to be involved for the, quote, long haul. Trump reportedly complained that Bolton and others underestimated Maduro, who the president has described as a, quote, tough cookie. Interesting that this change of heart came about not too long after Donald Trump had an hour-long conversation with Maduro supporter Vladimir Putin. And finally, it's a sign of the times. Denver voters on Tuesday approved a ballot measure to decriminalize hallucinogenic psilocybin mushrooms. The citizen initiative passed on Wednesday afternoon by a slim margin, with 50.56% in favor and 49.44% against. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is fully listener-supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro's Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit. We are expected to have a high of about, maybe 88 to 92. Ouch! Overnight lows look like they're going to be in the upper to mid-50s. And then we're going to have another high tomorrow in the low 90s, with overnight lows again in the upper 50s. So, okay, we'll take that. Winds are currently out of the southeast, light and variable. They will increase to 5 to 10 miles per hour out of the east-northeast in about an hour and a half or so. And that's where we're going to get our warmer wind. Our warmer air will be coming from the east, of course. And then I'll shift again tonight out of the northeast proper at that same clip. And then should be light and variable tomorrow with no determinate position of where the wind's coming. I presume it will still be out of the east since we'll have hot weather tomorrow. We're going to have a bit of warmer weather over the weekend. It looks like at the beginning of the week we should get down into the low 80s, upper 70s with a possibility of showers by Wednesday, maybe Tuesday. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for Tuesday. And then some more rain coming towards next weekend. So we'll see. That's a little bit of time out in the future, subject to change, of course. Pollen has gone down to moderate, and that's grass pollen. The air quality index is in the good range at 23 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is now back up into the high range at 6. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.68 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles. And relative humidity is at 62%. Getting dry, indeed. Though we did have some wispy upper clouds yesterday that did block some of the direct sunlight, which actually was a respite. Quite nice, I should say. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 56 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 61 with a rain shower. Rome is 71 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 53 with a light rain shower. Kabul is 71 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 73 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 63 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 64 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and cloudy with, yes indeed, an advisory for wind for small craft on the bay and offshore, so do take care. And New York, New York is 61 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world. Brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Joy Gray of Share Blue Media brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Matt Gaetz, arguably Trump's most devoted lapdog in Congress, was part of the opening act for that MAGA rally in Florida last night, which was Wednesday night. And that was where Gaetz declared that those who investigate Trump should be locked up. If anybody tries to deprive us of this country we have earned, Gaetz shouted to the crowd. If they try to undermine our president with lawless investigations, meaningless subpoenas, absurd contempt citations, we are going to turn the tables on them. We are going to investigate the investigators, and you're right. If it takes it, we will lock them up. And, like the lapdogs that vote for Trump, they all started shouting, lock them up, lock them up. Well, I don't know. I keep telling people, keep an eye on your neighbors. Really. Because it's the kind of red meat nonsense that Trump's rally goers have come to expect. Those who dare to exercise congressional oversight of Trump's lawless administration are somehow behaving lawlessly. Those who are tasked with investigating Trump's obstruction of justice and found several examples of it are somehow the ones who deserve jail time. It's all bizarre, but that's what happens at a Trump rally. It's also a bizarre argument coming from someone who is currently facing his own legal problems in Florida. Gaetz is under investigation for attempted witness tampering after he publicly threatened Trump's former fixer and attorney Michael Cohen in an effort to stop his damning testimony to Congress. The threat didn't work, but it did land Gaetz in trouble with the Florida Bar Association, which decided this week to escalate its investigation of his behavior. Well, maybe Gaetz thinks he's going to have some job in the administration when he gets kicked out of the bar. And he decides that, well, maybe, being a representative is really beneath me when I should be an autocrat in this administration. Because Gaetz is not shy about using his role in Congress to protect Trump. He has openly admitted that the reason he's there is not the people of Florida he's supposed to represent, but he's there for Trump. I don't know how I'd fit into this place in the absence of Trump, Gaetz told BuzzFeed in March. I wake up every day and I do what I can to expose what I believe is an intractable bias among the people who are investigating the president. Well, the reason for that, Matt, is that Trump has been mobbed up for decades. But the cops I know really do have a bias against crooks.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Mark Hosenball of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. U.S. prosecutors filed money laundering charges against two Israelis who made millions of dollars operating a website connecting customers to sellers of fentanyl, heroin, guns, and other illegal goods, the Justice Department said yesterday, Wednesday. It said Tal Prihar, an Israeli living in Brazil, and Michael Fawn, an Israeli living in Israel, owned and operated a website known as Deep.Web, or DDW. Some people say DDW, but we like to say DDW. Robert Johnson, an assistant director of the FBI, said DDW operated for years as a key gateway to the criminal underbelly of the so-called dark web or dark net economy. Scott Brady, the U.S. attorney in Pittsburgh, where the federal charges were filed, called the case the single most significant law enforcement disruption of the dark net to date. I wonder if Greenwald's going to be upset about this. The indictment alleges that the DDW referral service, operated by Prihar and Fawn, connected hundreds of thousands of users to dark web marketplaces not accessible through traditional search engines, which sold drugs, including cocaine, heroin, crystal meth, and fentanyl, as well as assault rifles, hacking tools, stolen credit cards, and other contraband. Wow, it's like a pirate's treasure trove. The Justice Department said Prihar was arrested by French authorities in Paris on May 6th, based on a U.S. request, while Fawn was arrested in Israel on the same day on Israeli charges. A federal official said it was not clear how the U.S. prosecutors would move forward with their charges while the defendants remain outside the country. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period. And we will meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. You know the Netroots Radio is going to broadcast down. So do stay tuned all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.